Here we go, everybody. Thank you. All right, so a little bit about how things will run. My colleague, Stan Baines, is my co-presenter for the evening. Hi, Stan. My name is Alexis Milligan, and I just want to give you the sense that this is an open space, an open and respectful space to share ideas. And the thing about this idea jam is we're not just here as a space for sharing or feeling like you have to contribute, you have to have something to say. It's also a space for reflection and a space for listening. And it's a space for contemplation and the sparking of ideas. So we invite you to listen as much as you may feel you want to share and participate your own thought and with your own thoughts. We're going to start, Stan and I, we're going to have a little chat, Stan and I, to kick things off in a little second here. And then we're just going to put the question out, a couple of questions, and just see where this first opportunity for us to reconnect takes us. If you would like to share something, if you've got something to say, just put up your hand, maybe give it a little wave. We'll clock it. We'll start putting people in order. Also pop into the chat. Any thoughts you have, or if you'd like to speak, just say, hey, I've got something to say. You can direct message either Stan or I to let us know, or you can just pop it into the chat to everyone saying, I'd like to share something. And we will come around and we'll make sure that everybody's in an order. And as I said, this will be posted to YouTube, which is a direct link from our website. And we will also be sending out the chat at the end. So without further ado, hey, Stan.
Yes.
How does the word creativity strike you?
Creativity is something very interesting for me. So having been on this journey with all of us, and I'm glad there's so many familiar faces and new faces, creativity in my life has always pretty much meant somebody painting something, somebody singing music, or some dramatic art thing, right? Like growing up through our education system, that is sort of how creativity was output back in that time, right? So I look at creativity as something kind of a little flighty, right? So my initial thoughts were very flighty, like, that's something that only the eccentric do, or that's something only the eclectic do, or that's something only the outside of the ether people do, right? So as I've come to grow in this journey, I'm really seeing that creativity is everywhere, right? It's everywhere that you turn, it's everything that you do. And it's not just being able to physically see a picture or being able to sit in on a play or, listening to fine music or rock music even. Creativity comes in how you live, right? How do you deal with people? How do you do your job? How do you interact with the world? So my background, just so that everybody knows, I'm a custodial supervisor for the Ottawa Carleton District School Board in Ottawa. So I'm in charge of a lot of custodians, and I deal directly with principals, superintendents, and a lot of the board administration to make the schools run in the background. So our jobs are pretty cut and dry. Here's when you start, here's where you end, here's what you do. We list out the duties. Well, what I've seen from doing this journey together with all of you is that there's more to how I do things, because if I think of where creativity falls, well, I have to be creative in my interactions with principals. I have to be creative sometimes in dealing with an emergency. I have to think outside of the box that the board has set for me to go, here's your parameters. Well, sometimes those parameters don't work, especially in an emergency or if I'm dealing with an upset parent. So my journey with creativity has shown me, and especially over the series that we did last year and that we're about to really launch into this year, is that we're not just looking for the obvious things that creativity says. We're not looking for what you were taught that creativity means. We're looking to dig deep into every person that joins us and to open your mind and expand your belief into what you think creativity is, because the very simple ways that you get up and brush your teeth could be very creative versus how somebody else does it. So I'm looking forward, Alexis, to being able to work with you and everybody else to continue to change what we believe creativity actually is.
Mm-hmm. There's something about that. Someone brought it up in the meeting the other day, which was the big C. creativity, and the word is everywhere, and it's funny how our associations with language change as we come to understand it in our own personal way. So our own story and relationship to language. And so when we see the word creativity, you know, it suddenly it's everywhere, and like it's on the front of every magazine, and it's every science commons, every academic commons, all these things, all about creativity. And it's like this big C word. And suddenly, like you say, it feels like it's outside. And so even myself as an actor and as a theater artist, when I come to talk about creativity, my sense of like distance from the word even, which is so funny, is that somehow I should have some academic understanding of what it is. And then I sort of feel like I know I'm creative in my art, but do I know how to talk about it? Do I know how to, do I break it down? Is there, I can talk about a process, but it's this idea that it's living. It's a living thing, creativity. It's something, like you say, it's in the everyday. I have to be creative in how I circumvent my teenage son from, you know, giving me that sharp bit of attitude, and how I'm going to respond, right? So how we navigate our association with the word, and how the word can influence like our perceptions of how we work with creativity and imagination. You know, I think imagination has something about permission, that somehow imagination, you need to give yourself space and permission to imagine, and that sometimes we find ourselves tentative to be imaginative or think of ourselves as being imaginative. So what are some of the ways, Stan, that you would, what is in some ways, I know you gave a couple of examples, that you find creativity in your work and in your life, and where do you think you would want to find more or other opportunities?
So after breaking the barrier of the definition, because as I spoke about earlier, we grew up in a time where things like imagination and creativity were sometimes seen as a negative aspect, because this now creates a wildness or a chaotic nature, because we weren't looking at how to tap into that. So using my job as an example, when we work and we find some of the employees kind of doing things outside of the realm of what they're doing, that can be problematic if we're not looking at it from the right perspective. So from an employer standpoint, we've set the rules and we've set the parameters. So we just simply need you to do the job that we've told you. Too much thinking creates too many changes creates problems. We still live in a semi-world of hierarchical setups, especially in school boards. So a lot of that may rock boats that we don't want. Well, when you look at it from that rock hard perspective, there's no room for growth. There's no room for advancement. That means what we've always done is what we will always do. And for those of us within an educational setting, and even outside of that, you can see where companies who structure themselves with this is what we've always done and it's worked, so shall we continue, tend to have tendencies to fall apart. If I can use an example, BlackBerry, Palm, right, where they thought they had something that this is the direction, but with no creativity to advance, it fell apart. So looking within my job, then I've learned as part of the training opportunities, that I've learned what I learned over time through training and through experience. But then I was kind of shoehorned rather into a place where not much to go with that. So as I look at my employees coming up, I recognize that a lot of the generations that exist now haven't learned the way we learned. We've changed the education system. We've changed the idea of how life goes. There's a lot of focus on self and personal needs, whereas back in the day, we blanket statement it. So when I deal with my employees now, I'm looking for what they can add to the system. Right? Our employer is looking for what can we put back in there to change that model of it always was and it always will be, because we need to tap into where people see something may be wrong. We need to recognize that there has to be an avenue sometimes to do this easier. Why did this not work out? Well, did we look at all opportunities? So as coming through this journey, I've recognized very quickly, almost from our first session, that I was looking at the world from a very closed source. Well, even at home, the way I manage and deal with my children has changed, because I have to be more open-minded to the fact that I'm not just the top of my food chain here. I'm not just the dad and you'll comply. There has to be a level of, maybe there's something that's driving this behavior. Maybe there's something that I'm not actively listening to. And maybe there's some other avenue rather than this is how I was raised, that's how they were raised, and I should continue with that. So it's about breaking that mold, right? And this was such an eye-opener. And even just talking about it now, my head is still kind of exploding with all these possibilities of what can I do tomorrow. So I like to look at these sessions not as a way to solve a problem, but as a way to continue to expand and grow. And as you spoke about, you know, being an actress, you know, you're directed and you're told what to do, but there's a level of freedom that comes when show us what else you've got. And this is where I like to look at that now, both from a work and home perspective. Maybe what I've been doing all along, or my thought process to it, isn't quite correct. Maybe there is another way, and I want to tap into how many other ways is there to get to the end goal, because the end goal may change depending on what idea comes in there. And that's where imagination and then a lot of free thought comes into play, where we're coming from a world where it wasn't before. So it's I'm looking forward to what we can do, and just throw it out there so that every day I leave these sessions, it's like, what can I put into play tomorrow?
I think that's been one of the big takeaways, and what I'm again looking forward to, because this is a chance to regroup, to reconnect, is what have there been any revelations? Like, this has been in an extraordinary time, and where is creativity within the landscape of all of the things that feel like this chaos that seems to still be you know, growing and in and around not only our individual lives and in our areas and our communities, but globally, right? So when we think about where creativity is and our relationship to it, I'm curious as to, have there been any revelations or thoughts or frustrations, new ideas, or, you know, are we all just screaming at the wind still, and where those inroads are happening as a result of maybe breaking through some of those frustrations? And I think at the end of the day, one of the things that we wanted to do with this particular idea jam is set ourselves up for a year of looking at, where are we starting now? And when we come to June, when we're, you know, maybe entering into next summer, dare I even say 2022, which is suddenly around the corner, where are we going? Where are you going personally, your personal relationship, but also where is creativity going? And is it just the use of this word and our shifting association, or how are we moving forward within our own creativity and then in the broader landscape? So I'm going to toss that over, and Stan and I are here to filter and help sort of organize all the feedback. But the question is, where are you with creativity now, and where maybe are you going, even if it's not about getting to the destination? Let's make sure that's clear. Mary, Stuart, yes, you had your hand up.
Well, I just wanted to note that as a visual artist primarily, sometimes I find it daunting to try to define creativity. It seems like very often we grapple with this question round and round and round, and I find it oftentimes more productive to just try to seek out exemplars of creativity, because for one thing, it's more fun for me, frankly. I just love talking to, you know, people who are incredible manifestations of creativity, of which I've had the good experience to do a great deal of that lately. And the other thing is, it seems like the definitions keep expanding and evolving too. You know, I'm actually in the midst of interviewing the president and CEO of the New Brunswick Youth Orchestra right now, a guy named Ken McLeod. And his background is biology, you know, and then he got into administration and various things. He's not a musician, he's not an artist, but boy, is he a heck of a leader. right? And so in his mindset, connections between creativity and leadership are really pivotal, because if you have a great idea and you're able to take action on it productively, those align very significantly. So as I say, for me, oftentimes seeking out exemplars more than trying to hone definitions can be productive.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Fred, that you've just brought up in the chat, which is this idea of criteria for creativity, and how are we defining it, and again, how we individually relate to the word small c or big C in that sense, and then how do we find again that idea that creativity is in, like you say, within leadership, within qualities and aspects of individuals, that isn't necessarily just that you are creative. It's this way of thinking. It's this way of being. Any other thoughts out there on your relationship right now with creativity and where it sits? Yeah, that's it, Susan. I've been questioning about 50 years. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah, please. Yeah, CJ.
Hi. My name is CJ. I come from public art mostly, exploring collaboration. So I think that, like, trying to worry about who owns or who can define creativity is perhaps a good jump off point or a moot point. I'm not sure, but I think that collaboration and inclusion and diversity and silo breaking are actually much more needed now. And I can remember a time presenting at a conference, an academic conference, and somebody brought up the word of ethical, which is perhaps at that time was seen as weird as the word service. And then they said the word ethical, and then one of the responses was, "Oh, that's so sentimental," as if art. I mean, I do mostly come from visual arts, so there are different things that we can do with our skills, is what I'm getting at. And it wasn't always a time where art was I was attending something the other day by Mass Culture, and I think they were talking, it was the launch, no, it was the Metcalf Foundation. And they were talking about the launch of this report that this musician had made. And he was I am hearing everywhere how institutions are failing because they're very busy building bricks around themselves and having their systems of accreditation. And it really almost seems passé, because if you look back before there was written language, if we look at art or look at creativity from anthropology's time scale, it's not so much accreditation as it is based on survival. And there were times before language, before the voice box was even in place, that you can see that there is proof around burial ceremonies, how much creativity was done by clusters of people to assure stability and survival. And so I think that, so right now I'm just started an organization with a doctor who was the VP of Medical Affairs at Briere, but we've started this organization called Radical Connections. And we're working on a global level to address local things. And the axis of our practice is around the changing demographic. And I just was recently attending recently, like 2 hours ago, attending something on palliative care. And we kind of live in this death-denying society where billions and billions of people are aging. And it seems to me that creativity could go back to what it is in relation to a larger society than just accreditation and academic things. We might be concerned more with survival and inclusion and the way we treat each other.
Well said, yes. Susan, Susan, you've got your hand up, and you have reminded me about the raise hand feature. So yes, down at the bottom of your Zoom, if you can't engage in the raise the hand, it's a great way to put things in order too. So thank you. Yes.
Hi, everybody. Really happy to be here. I'm from Liverpool originally, but I've worked in 5 different countries with 32 different nationalities. And I think a lot of our comments are related to how other people think about creativity. And in fact, I never realized I was creative until I came to Argentina in 1998. And people started saying to me, "You're very creative." And I didn't even realize I was creative. I'd been brought up in Liverpool in the 60s, of course. And I was surrounded, I guess, by creativity, but I didn't know I was surrounded by it. It was just like my life. I was with the Beatles. I was dancing with the Beatles in the cavern. I went to the same school as John Lennon. My boyfriend was Sir Ken Robinson. And I didn't think it was anything special. But now I have realized that it really is something special. And I'm trying my best, as Michael and Peter know, to spread the word around the world. And I think it's something that you are doing magnificently and that we are going to define in our own way. And as I've worked with 32 different nationalities, I think we have to consider how different cultures actually look at creativity and how it is different for different people. And it's different for different religions, different cultures, different nationalities, different genders. And what happens is that many people are afraid of creativity, but many other people in probably equal numbers are vying for creativity and want to bring it into their lives. And that is what I am trying to do in my own little way. I have my own little academy for teachers, and we have a thriving PLC, which you are invited to. And I think that I want to create a creative culture in education in general, but particularly in English language teaching, which has become my field. It wasn't my field originally, but it has become my field. And I think that English language teachers need to be more creative. And I think that it brings joy and challenge to the classroom, as Dorothy Heathcote said many years ago in the 60s. I don't know if any of you know Dorothy Heathcote, but she's really worth listening to. Although she didn't write very much, people have written about her work. She didn't write very much herself. But Lynn is nodding. I guess that you know about her. And I think that we are all on like the right track. And I think we are flying the flag. This is what I always say. Let's fly the flag for creativity in every area of education, not just education, but every area of society, because it brings joy, it brings pleasure, it brings happiness, and it allows people to blossom, it allows people to develop, it allows people to, well, as Ken Robinson says, find their element. And I know some people don't agree with that, but personally, I think we all need to find our element, and we have to help our youngsters find their element if you're in education. That's my tuppence worth, Alexis. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. That was really good. And you brought up a very good point. You said a lot of people are afraid of creativity, and then a lot of people are kind of vying to get in. And this is where in our discussions we're looking for where those are. Where are those people that are jumping to get out there, and where are those people that are hiding behind something? Because that right there inhibits creativity. We need to get people past that to go, everything that you do can be creative. So I have an example. One of my employees, a junior employee, is vying to move up in our system. So we have training, and the school board offers some information. They can talk to me as a supervisor, but what she's done is she's created her own Google Classroom to teach herself. So that's pretty initiative to me from a management perspective. But then as she showed me the Google Classroom, there are different sections and different areas, and she's brought this to such a high level that we as the organization actually need to take a look at this. So what's happened currently is that our union has gotten some of it, which is fine because they want to help the members too, and I'm all about that. But I didn't recognize early in the game what potential that had, because I was afraid that was too creative, right? That seemed too out there. But then over time, as I've seen, and as she's using this information to help other workers, to train them, and she's networking with people, that's exactly what creativity is. She took a leap for herself, and then somebody saw faith in that, and then now that's blossomed. So this is where, as we're dealing with people, and even within ourselves, when we see those moments of apprehension, like, is this something, like, should I branch into this? Should I give this a try? There's nothing that's not worth trying, because as long as your brain has come up with it and you've thought it through and you go, my heart is in it, you create a passion for it. So that's where, to me, don't let your passion stop you, because you're lighting a fire that's going to become a blazing glory, right? So my 2 cents worth. Thanks, Susan.
Michael, yes.
Thanks very much. I'd like to slice creativity into an eatable part, just a sliver of it. And it's on the issue of collaboration. And even further, on the issue of the magic and mystery of what you can accomplish with a certain group of people mixed together. I was once a jazz musician. I was once a terrible actor. And I was once a football player. And in all three relatively unconnected areas, it was always fascinating to me to understand that with some other people, you could create magic. And with some others, it was a dud. Of course, I never blamed myself. It was always because I was with the wrong people. And yet the opposite is true. We've all had those experiences, have we not? Where we are working collaboratively with any number of people to accomplish something. And sometimes something magic happens, and your accomplishment ends up being far greater than the mere sum of the component parts, to steal a Gestalt quote. And it's always struck me as continually fascinating. What is it that made Paul Desmond and Dave Brubeck greater together than they ever were separately? Or Simon and Garfunkel better together? And we can go on and on. And in my case, I played better with some jazz musicians than others. Of course, it was never my fault. And I played better with some football. So I was fascinated with the kind of magic, because I can't find any other explanation for it, because it's beyond simply that you're working with good people on a certain project. So I want to go after and ask the question, what is there about creativity that's mysterious and magic?
All right, Dean. And then, oh, you're going to have to give me your first name again. M-S-A-U-L-I-G. Just, but Dean, and then, yes.
Marina.
If I could answer
Thank you.
Michael's, if I could answer Michael's question directly and say nothing, right? There is nothing magical or mysterious about creativity. only what it produces and what comes out of it, the end product. The process itself is, Mariette said, what happens if you have authority in the situation? Well, my response is, are we talking about authoritarian or are we talking about authoritative? Do you have what everybody is talking about here, collaboration, or even just acceptance? So Stan is talking about acceptance, which was a novel idea back in the 70s when the major car companies said, our shop floor people might have some ideas. They may actually know how to solve some of the technical problems that we have, and they monetized the suggestion box, so gave awards to some of their individuals. Now, one could say that's just simply problem solving, but I would argue that as long as we say creativity is a function of the arts, we are minimizing our ability as human beings to bring that, if I turn around what I said earlier and borrow from Michael and say, take that magic and apply it to the world around us, I think we're looking at ways of improving our lives, whether it's in a school, taking care of the buildings themselves, so improving the lives of the workers, improving the productivity, improving the school by individuals coming up with solutions that maybe the board thought was going to be completely out of budget. And suddenly somebody says, well, if we did this instead of this, we're just replacing, and we covered both situations. It's, there's the magic. It's not in the word creativity. I think it's in solving real world problems. And some of those real world problems are, what's the next word I put on that blank page to start my first novel? Right? It applied to so many things. So, and now I'll be quiet.
Great, thanks, Dean. There is so much about, again, like you said earlier, Stan, about adapting to change, and this shift of thinking, and we break through these sort of walls of frustration or engage, and it's really, really hard to engage with change. It's really hard to think of new things in new ways when it feels like something's been kind of rolling along nice and easy, and why would we disrupt anything? And yet we seem to crave the disruption. We want to move through something, to find those new avenues, to either simplify or to reassemble, or in some new capacity. So there's something that's really interesting about, like you said, this push against change. We're going to have Maureen and then Blaine, please. Are you able to unmute? I've just asked to unmute. Can you click on the button?
Thank you. Thank you.
Go. You're good. I gotcha.
Thank you so much. I've been having problem with the volume and the audio. Anyways, thank you. Creativity for me is everywhere in our lives all the time. From the moment I get up in the morning and try to decide what to wear, every conversation I have to engage my imagination, envision what the other is saying, what I'm trying to say, where I'm trying to go with students. Where are they at? Where do I want them to be at? What are they thinking about me? Creativity is involved in everything that we do. Specifically in my role as an educator in a school in northern British Columbia right now, I'm working primarily with First Nations students. And I tell you, they keep me hopping, because every moment of every day and every conversation that I have with them, their world is so different from mine. I really have to engage very and be very focused in what I am saying, how I am saying it. Am I speaking to them in a way that they hear, that they understand? Am I making myself understood? And especially, I am fighting the status quo. In education, we are still operating with a system that's based on the Industrial Revolution. You know, the classrooms, the chairs, the boards, we've replaced the blackboards with a whiteboard or a smart board. Still the same thing. I've been fighting that for 42 years since I started being a teacher. And it just does not work it works for some students. They seem to enjoy it. Doesn't work for all. And here, especially where we're dealing with residential schools and generational trauma, etc., that system does not work for a majority of our students. So I have to be incredibly innovative and try to find different ways. And every day, what works with one doesn't work with another. We know that when we deal with people, whether you're in as a colleague or in a supervisory role, one has to engage always and think about, okay, who am I dealing with? Where are they coming from? What's their story? And how can I move them along in a way that's going to benefit, in my case, the students in our school? Thank you. Now you're going to have to unmute me because
Shall I unmute you? All right, I got you.
Yeah,
I'm good. All right, Blaine.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate Alexis, the opportunity to add a few thoughts here. I want to go back to Michael's point because of where is the magic and mystery in creativity. That's been something that I've struggled with for well over 5 decades in my own role as an educator. And I've looked at it in various ways. I've looked at it from Frery's point of view of the critical quest. I've looked at it from other viewpoints in terms of the nexus of learning, the aha moment, all of these kinds of things that come together. Presently, I'm working with a group of pre-service teachers, and we're looking at the whole business of creativity in a course called Imagination, Creativity, Education. So I'd like to go back and just kind of parse it out a little bit more, if I might, by suggesting that the magic and the mystery occurs, first of all, when we are united in our curiosity over a particular idea, a particular quest that we have for knowledge or understanding. And that curiosity, in my mind, leads to a germination of ideas or ideation, which we might then call imagination. The process, as others have commented on earlier this evening, for me, that process is creativity. But I wanted to pick up on what the last speaker talked about when she said, quote, I have to be innovative every day. And I would like to put forward the argument that education in itself is innovation each and every day. In each and every activity, in each and every strategy, in each and every lesson plan, in each and every interaction with our students, it is a constant realm of innovation. And sometimes we tend to think of innovation as having to be something scientific, something that relates to STEM or possibly even STEAM. I would suggest there's another word that we could add in there called stream, but I'll get into that at another time. But my point is that when we're looking at creativity, I think we get caught up on a word and what it means because you've got big C, little c, middle C. You know, it sounds to me like I'm playing a keyboard, which I don't play very well. And those kinds of things, when I think that what we need to be looking at is understanding that education is in itself innovation, and that it's not a product that necessarily we're arriving at, as much as it is an awakening, an understanding, a consciousness of the possibility and potentiality that exists within each of our students to achieve their ultimate self. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Blaine. Anyone else have something that they want to vocalize or share? Goran, yes, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and it's such a pleasure to be here. Sorry, I'm running a little bit late, and I joined a few minutes delayed, but I caught a bunch of really wonderful commentary, and I just love all of your perspectives. It's just brilliant and wonderful. I think for me, just reflecting on what everyone said, it's really evocative to think about so many of your thoughts. I love Michael's point around greater than the sum of its parts and this kind of mysterious and magic part. And I love a speaker from a moment ago sort of describing these notions of thinking about it in educational context for a variety of lenses. And I particularly sort of appreciated Susan's point around creativity as survival and I am the element, which is really lovely. And yet it seems to be kind of juxtaposed against Dean's points around creativity is about problem solving. And there was a wonderful comment, I think, about the Industrial Revolution. I wonder whether one of the reasons why it's hard to peg down creativity and to sort of define what it is, it might be for a range of reasons. And I wonder whether one of these reasons is the fact that creativity is multimodal. It seems to kind of make it challenging to peg it down because it shows up in various mediums and modalities in different ways, which is both its strengths and definitionally, I think, a little bit of a challenge because we can say so many things and actually be quite correct, which is what makes it rather wonderful. I think for me, it's increasingly coming to this sort of realization that, and I literally just wrote it down as you were all talking about it, I've been kind of thinking about it for the past little while, that creativity might be perhaps an active expression of this kind of reflective, multisensory relationship with life that's explored through movement that embodies imagination in some way. Because that active expression, I think, relays some of the key qualities of creativity, and yet we know that imagination, this embodiment of imagination is involved, and yet this kind of multisensory component of creativity is still there. We've heard many of you talk about creativity in the classroom, on the assembly line in Toyota plants, Dave Brubeck, and music in other contexts. So there seems to be this reflective component and the multisensory component and some kind of embodiment of imagination in various modalities. And I think this is an interesting thing to consider for us as a group and really for a society as a whole, because the state of our technology, reflecting off the industrialism comment, is now, technology has gotten to an interesting point because technology can now sort of simulate a lot of things that humans do, and a lot of people are kind of in this quandary. Are machines actually creative? Look, they're painting things. Like, look, they're thinking things. Look, they're saying things. Look, they're writing things. The GPT-5, GPT-3, or GPT-4 is an algorithm that's just coming out. It writes stories, and it's confused people. It's confused more than a few persons, actually, as to whether it's been written by a human or not. But I would argue that this is actually not creativity, at least according to my definition. It is systems that are, replicating patterns that are generated by beings that are capable of being creative. It's replicating patterns of creative acts. And this is where I would like to connect to this point around, creativity is about survival because, the original, I think, speaker that sort of talked about, we've been creative, before, when we barely even had language. We were drawing things on cave walls, and it seems to be something quite primeval. And it might be that the extent to which we can actually enable creativity in our lives is the extent to which we can leverage all of this technology and potentiality that's around us without actually confusing our own creativity with other things.
That's where so many things that we do sort of on a day-to-day basis, right? So if we look at creativity from a primitive perspective where it's chaotic, right? Like there's so much output that could come from that what could be the end problem if we allow that to continue to explode. Everybody's brought up many good points that sometimes creativity is simply just the mechanism to go from where I am to where I need to go. So as we look at things in a defined perspective of, as how teachers would do that, or how a professor would do that, or how that would work in an acting environment, the defined areas, it often draws me to, well, what does the carpet installer do? How does the Tim Hortons worker be creative, right? Like, how does the day-to-day people who we would look at, like, so, you know, mind me for a moment, who we may look at for only but a brief second, they provided a surface and then we think no longer of them as we're moving past. Well, as we sit here as professionals and as people who work and in the working world, they're part of that too. So this is where, as we're looking at, where's that magic, or where's the mechanism, or how does it work, then part of that needs to encompass the people who definitely, when they show up to work, may not automatically think of creativity at all. But as I see how the Tim Hortons worker will put the little DD on my cup and add a little smile, where they may have done that 5,000 times before I got there, but that little bit of spark to do that one little bit extra adds that little bit more. So that's somewhere where as we're looking at this, or not attempting to define it, but just bring it to a place where we can grab a little bit of it and let it carry us, then where is it bringing us? Peter, I saw your hand was up. You got to unmute yourself.
There we go. People say that to me. So what I think, sometimes I think we can get too caught up in definition. And I'm going to be blunt. Just earlier, Alexis, you made a comment about the craving for disruption. I can absolutely assure you that the systems that I have worked in have not craved disruption. They have done everything in their power to stifle it. So as I'm getting older, trying to reduce things to somewhat simplistic models. And there's a wonderful cybernetic thinker, social systems thinker called Gregory Bateson, who defined learning as difference that makes a difference. And I'm starting to think of creativity like that. It's like, what are we doing in our own spheres to foster cultures of learning within our own spheres of influence so that people can make a difference, to make a difference around us? I think of the Tim Hortons worker. It's funny because I've been going to this one Tim Hortons for years. And when this lady first arrived there, she could not speak a word of English. She was a server. She still is. Now she speaks fluent English. And every day that I've been there, not every single day since, but there's always a wonderful, welcoming smile on that lady's face. She makes a difference that makes a difference. And I don't care whether you're on the factory floor or in a board of directors, there's always ways of doing that. But what I have found is that what really matters is that the formal leaders create that space in which difference that makes a difference can be awakened in whatever way that presents itself. So it's a plea for don't overthink this. I think one of the pathologies that sets in, if you look at the paralysis that's within the education system that's been increasing over the last 40 years, it's because of how we've defined what it is to be smart, how we've defined who is and who is not creative, and we've defined what real leadership is in schools. And the pathology of those three together have stifled the education system, and they've done great disservice to many, many, many young people and their families. Our job now is to actually, I do crave disruption, Alexis, is to disrupt.
I know
that.
you do, Peter. That's it. That's exactly it. And I just want to clock that we're usually very tight on our 9 o'clock stop. We have 7 minutes left. We've got Fred and then Paul, and then Stan and I'll wrap it up. We do like to keep it tight within the hour because we just want to make sure we're going to come back craving more. All right, Fred, please. Then.
Yes, I was thinking this whole time as Dean was talking and now as Peter's talking about the stiflers. And we were looking at early development, and we were thinking about what would create a culture in an early young child so that their creativity is flourishing and that they can become the greatest person they can be. And in the education system, where Susan was mentioning how often we stifle creativity out of our students, and I'm really focusing around the fact that I think it is our assessment process. If it's too difficult to assess something, then we shove it down and bury it. And for me, like an SFU cohort for postgrad, we were doing projects, but
they were just pass or fail. There was no grading. What we were doing is presenting to our peers, and everyone was amazing. And there were such creative approaches to how they would share their passion of their inquiry. And there were people being moved to tears. And no grading system I've ever been part of moved people to tears unless the grade meant that they were going to get beaten at home by their parents who had standards that they had to keep up. But it was what others felt about our work that they recognized and saw what we were doing. And I think if we're going to create change, then this is one area that needs a lot of attention too, is how do we highlight the beauty? And I think what we're doing here is an example where we share the ideas and bounce them off one another's and have our eyes and ears opened by how someone else saw something, and all of a sudden our mold is broken, as Stan said, and we see in a new way, and we hear in a new way, so that our former assumptions are challenged in a way that we rethink and research. End of soapbox.
Fantastic, Fred. Thank you. Paul.
I can't even hear myself now. My microphone just went all way. I was really appreciative of most of the comments tonight. And Goran, thank you. You hit some hot spots there early on that resonated. I've been fixated on creativity for so long that I've overlooked imagination. And I'm moving far deeper into the realms of imagination in my research, because I think it's the underpinning of everything. I saw Mary post something earlier about creativity combined with empathy. And of course, without imagination, there is no empathy. And Jillian speaks ad nauseum about that point, trying to get that across, that it's I think the core of everything we're talking about is the imaginative realm. Gore mentioned creativity gives purpose to imagination. Or something to that effect. And I think creativity does give us as an art teacher, it gives reasons for kids to imagine on something that's non-threatening, because they're just making art, right? They're not trying to solve the world's problems. But too often in our culture, in our work culture, because we're so obsessed with getting things done and the pressures of time and space, that we're always so busy trying to innovate. And I think when we innovate, we circumvent imagination entirely. We end up pulling from stuff that's already sitting in our minds and thinking, well, or personal interest, or what's going to make my job easier as a remedy. And then we and too often committee decisions try to push that on everyone else. So in a sense, creativity gives purpose for imagination, and innovation tries to kill it. I suspect that's happening a lot in our culture. Goran also made a good point that creativity is survival. I mean, that is the essence of who we are. Like, at the core of it, I would say imagination is survival. I mean, that's the remedy for the crises we face planetarily, and more immediately coming out of COVID, getting past the trauma that stops us from thinking, that stops us from imagining. But more so, this is a time of opportunity. I've read just on a tweet this morning, right off a principal's door, bring me solutions, don't bring me problems. There's no time to dwell on problems. We look at all of those barriers to creativity and barriers in our practices. Maybe it is assessment, but I'm seeing now a lot of new assessment practices, especially the focus is on observation, conversations, and products, that we're broaden that to say, no, what are the ways we can observe what they're learning on their own terms, and increasingly personalized learning, and move to more optimistic scope of what learners and teachers are presenting as change makers within our system. The whole new OECD curriculum on global competencies is about optimism and change, the sustainability, democratic principles, where whatever kids learn, we're trying to say, hey, okay, work with us. How do we apply this to making the world a better place? Imagine the possibilities of that. I think a lot of our tone and research focus has to really look towards those optimistic, positive ways forward, and less Yeah, true. I mean, if we're going to get more flow, you got to remove barriers. Absolutely. But let's look for the more of the opportunities to make that flow occur. And our systems are trying to increasingly personalize education, and our leaders still aren't embracing imagination at all. And that's where I'm going to target my research emphatically. How do we get leaders to embrace imaginative pedagogies within their training systems and within their practices for themselves and for their learners and their teachers? And I think that collectively we can move forward and build that efficacy together. The whole future of public education, the whole future of humanity lays on our imaginative potential. Right? So Gordon was absolutely spot on. Creativity is our survival.
Yes. Thanks, Paul. And yeah, that was CJ was reflecting on that at the very beginning as well. And I think that this is something that, again, it's so interesting, again, with the chat to see how things are coming up at the beginning, and then we're seeing them and we're going through it and we're kind of revisiting those ideas and shifting and changing our thoughts. Stan, we've got like 30 seconds, final thoughts, and then I'll wrap us up.
So 30-second final thought. Thank you for joining us. This is just the beginning, right? This is where we're going to start. And for those of you that were here last year, you know the journey we were on. So as we continue to move forward, we want you to hang with us, because the conversation starts here and continues past the end of the year. So I'm looking forward to more. I really am. And I thank you all for sharing.
Thank you so much on behalf of the steering committee. We just really appreciate your time and your offerings and your excitement and your imaginations as we dream about this. We are going to set the question for the year. Where are you in your relationship to creativity and your work now? And where are you going? And someone had literally just said that. Where am I? Where do I need to go? Where are we? Where do we need to go? So again, like you say, Paul, what are the solutions, in a sense of not just coming back to keep talking about the problems, but where are we finding those little things, those little opportunities where we are the difference that's making the difference? And are we just screaming into the wind? Where are those steps to gain and find that flow? And I think this is a group that can find that opportunity as we go out to have that task. I think that's a great thing, Peter, for us to take with us is the difference of the difference of the difference of the difference. We set that flow going. So thank you so much. We're gonna stop recording and we'll end meeting. So thank you all for being here, and we will see you next month for Michael, who is going to ask, are you having an aesthetic moment? We'll see what Michael has to say about that next month. All right, we'll see you later, everybody. All the best.